world, let's chat it up. We're talking competitions, uniforms, and all of the above. It's the Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Moms, your podcast is on.
Do you want to get that high pony looking slick and clean every time? Well, whether it's competition hair, getting that super clean look for your choreography, or even just that cute, trendy low bun for going out with friends, Slick Hair Company is your answer. Slick Hair Company is the founder of the original Slick Stick, and they also provide high-quality hair care, hair accessories, and styling products that will help you to achieve the perfect style and look. I used their wax stick for that middle part low bun look, and it was awesome. I was even able to curl my hair the next day without washing it, and my hair wasn't all greasy and gross. Founded by a female entrepreneur, Slick Hair uses cruelty-free ingredients that smooths all hair types. They hydrate and strengthen your hair. They promote hair growth and leave your hair feeling fresh and not greasy or sticky. Visit slickhaircompany.com/thecheermomblog and use code thecheermomblog for 10% off your entire order. That's slickhaircompany.com/thecheermomblog and use code thecheermomblog for 10% off. Your perfect style awaits with Slick Hair Company. This episode of the Cheer Mom podcast is supported by the Cheer Collection, inspirational jewelry styles for every cheer enthusiast. As cheer moms, athletes, and those who love cheer moms and their athletes, we're all looking for a way to show our support. Sometimes that's a big fat head with your athlete's face or a big blingy jersey, but those things don't always translate into our day-to-day lives. The Cheer Collection provides quality, classic jewelry pieces, expertly engraved with subtle quotes like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, hit 0, and 1, 3, 5, 7. A necklace, bracelet, or ring from the Cheer Collection can be worn at school, work, or anywhere you need or want a touch of class and a little encouragement or reminder of the sport or the athlete that you love so much. And for those who have been asking, brand ambassador applications are now open. Big things are coming to the ambassador community, including opportunity for leadership development, to have input on new pieces of jewelry, and of course, to build community and make new friends. Visit thecheercollection.com. That's thecheercollection.com for details. And just for listeners of this podcast, if you enter code POD15, that's POD 15, you'll get 15% off of your purchase. Have you ever watched one of those end of the world zombie movies or shows, whether it's most recently The Last of Us or Stranger Things? You know, where some kind of extraterrestrial being comes and invades the city and takes over the world and a bunch of people die, but your hero characters know exactly what to do and they have the survival skills and they survive because the writers make them survive, obviously. But do you ever watch those and wonder if this were to happen in real life, which character you would be? Because I have. And I can very confidently sit here before you and tell you that I would not survive past the second scene. You know, because the first scene is usually the main character having breakfast with their kids or minding their own business or just getting out of jail. And the second scene is when everything hits the fan, and I would not make it past that. I would be screaming girl A. I would be the person who hits the windshield of the main character's car screaming, "Help me," and then dies in 5 seconds. I have little to no survival skills. When it comes to anything invading the world, I just don't have that main character energy. But I am the main character of this podcast that you were listening to today. And this episode kicks off a series that I am doing on varsity and the history of cheerleading. Very catchy title. Yeah, it's not that creative, but I was spending all my time thinking about how I would survive in an apocalypse. I just didn't have time to come up with a catchy title. Varsity has been in the news this year and over the last several years, off and on. It is a very common topic among cheer parents, among coaches and gym owners. And I have spent what has turned into months of deep diving research. I have had meetings and conversations with many people about Varsity and how Varsity became Varsity. To give you a preview of this series, we're going to start with some facts that most of you probably don't know about the history of cheer and how Varsity became as big as it is. If you are a student, elementary, middle school, high school, even a college student, the information that is out there on the history of cheerleading, Varsity as a business, the cheer business in general, there is a wealth of information for any kind of research paper that you are writing. And I encourage the students to dive a little deeper into some of these topics because you could actually have fun learning about your sport and come up with a very unique topic for a paper if you ever need one. Many of your questions that I put out there for you to ask will be answered through this series. And I am going to have one or two very, very special guests as part of the series. So buckle up. It has been a fun ride for me, and I think it might just be for you too. We recently learned in the news that Bain Capital, Varsity's parent company, had put out a valuation of Varsity at around $6 billion. I talked about that on the podcast before, and I said, my guess is they're either going public or they're getting ready to sell. And sure enough, Bain Capital has sold Varsity Brands to a private equity firm called KKR for a reported $4.75 billion. Now, Varsity Brands is not just cheerleading. It's made up of several divisions, including BSN Sports, Varsity Spirit, Varsity Fashion, etc. In the last decade or so, Varsity's been accused of being a monopoly. It has been named in lawsuits and accused of controlling up to 80% or more of the cheerleading market. Varsity is a full service cheerleading company. So they own and sell everything from the events that we buy tickets to cheer uniforms. They've launched a new cosmetics line of their own. And I'm told that they even own all the way up to the timers in the warm-up rooms at cheer competitions. They own and host over 600 cheer events, over 40 brands, just in cheer alone. That doesn't even include dance and other disciplines. Varsity has become the leading name of school cheer, all-star cheer. They own a division of band uniforms. In fact, almost every marching band uniform that you see is a Varsity marching band uniform. So in the context of cheerleading, how did Varsity become Varsity? How did they become this multi-billion-dollar business? How did they become the common enemy on almost every cheer parent's lips? Well, in order to even start to figure that out, we have to go back to the very beginning, where we are going to meet two men named Lawrence Herkimer and Jeff Webb. So as the Wayne's World chimes begin to play, go on a journey with me to the past. Let's travel back in time and learn a little history of cheerleading. Let's go back to the very first cheerleader. The year is sometime in the 1800s. Yes, the 1800s. And you would think it would be somewhere in Texas, but actually, the first recorded or known cheer team looked very different than what we know today. Princeton actually had a group of yell leaders that they called the Pep Club. And then in the 1890s, the University of Minnesota football team was struggling through a very poor season. You know, they were just having a bad streak. Some things are just timeless. And so a student by the name of Johnny Campbell wanted to encourage his football team at the University of Minnesota. So he created some chants to yell to encourage them. And he got a team of men together, and they were yell leaders. The imagery of these yell leaders at both Princeton and Minnesota, I liken to those of you who know Texas A&M and how they have the yell leaders and their traditions and their traditional chants during the games. I think that it was like that. Let me just teach you one of the first chants that Johnny Campbell and his group of yell leaders created for the University of Minnesota team. Rah, 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 skoo-oo-mar, hoorah, hoorah, varsity, 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 Minnesota. Yeah. So from the 1890s all the way to around the 1920s, so around 30 years, there were cheer squads, and they were all male. They didn't let girls in. Yeah, you were thinking that this history of cheerleading was going to be about the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. No, they didn't come on the scene until the 1960s, and they weren't even considered cheerleaders when they started, and they're not considered cheerleaders today. I know they're called the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, and we love you, Kelly, and everything that the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders are, but they don't even come into the cheerleading conversation. No. So there were these yell leaders, that a team of all men, and then they very reluctantly started to let women in on their teams in the 1920s. And then women really burst onto the scene in the 1940s when all of the men were off fighting in World War II. So the 40s, that was our decade, girls. That was our time. You know, we had the vote finally, and women started showing up, not just in baseball. A League of Their Own is one of my favorite movies, but also in cheerleading. So we think of cheer being female dominated. Well, the way that it started, it really wasn't. And women had to fight for their place in cheerleading too. And it was a struggle because the men didn't think that the women had what it took to A, perform the difficult tumbling skills, and B, they didn't think they had the voices to lead the yells because women typically don't have that deep, loud voice. Harvard didn't even allow female cheerleaders until 1971. And the aforementioned Texas A&M, based on my research, did not have females on their cheer team until 2001. As someone who grew up and graduated high school in Austin, Texas, I need you guys to know how hard I'm working not to smack talk A&M. It's a big deal that I'm not. It's a big deal that I'm not. I'm not going to get into Texas A&M trivia. Okay, so fast forward to 1948. The war is over, the men are back, and a 23-year-old man named Lawrence Herkimer, who was a gymnast and a teacher at Southern Methodist University in Texas, started messing around with his tumbling skills. He taught PE, and he started teaching cheer squads more skills. He borrowed $600 to start a cheerleading camp, and he actually didn't start it at SMU. He hosted it at Sam Houston State Teachers College, which we know today just as Sam Houston State, which, by the way, if I recall, they also still have a very successful cheer team. And maybe it's the spirit of Lawrence Herkimer and his first cheerleading camp. So the very first year he hosted a camp, there were 52 girls and 1 boy. And the second year, 350 people showed up to this cheerleading camp, and the National Cheerleaders Association camps were born. These cheer camps grew and grew over decades. And I think just about everyone in the cheer industry would agree with the statement that Lawrence Herkimer, or also known as Herky, cheerleaders, have you heard of the Herky jump? It's named after Herkimer. He created it. But Herky's camps were the impetus for the sport becoming as big as it is, and for cheerleading being such a big part of our American culture. I'm told that these camps really were like having a family, and sleepaway camps don't exist as much as they used to. I think they have really died out as of the 2000s, not just for cheer, but in everything. But I went to camp when I was a kid, and it wasn't cheer camp, but some of my most core special memories of my childhood happened at camp. Like, who doesn't love a good camp-like atmosphere? You're away from home. We had counselors that we would only see over the summer, or camp friends that we would pen pal with and, oh man, I'm showing my age, write letters to, and then see each other during the summer. It really was very, very special, the camp atmosphere. And so I can see how a cheerleading camp would create the same feeling, the same atmosphere. And NCAA camp became a very special thing. Cheer squads would come to learn new things, and then the best of them would get to be on NCAA staff. And as I have learned, the status of cheer camp staff meant so much more than maybe what it means today. UCA and NCAA both still have camps to this day, and we'll get to UCA in a little bit. And there are camp staff, and a lot of the guests that I have had and will have on the podcast, they started as NCAA or UCA staff. They started teaching these, they started their cheer careers teaching these camps. And that's great, and that's cool, and we appreciate them. But what I'm told about NCAA staff back in the day was that they were celebrities in the cheer space. So those of you who go to all-star competitions and you're taking pictures with, they likened it to TGLC and Cheetahs and Panthers. You're taking pictures with those athletes. That was what being on NCAA staff was like. Herky created a magazine called Megaphone. I want to get my hands on one of these magazines. I have not been able to find one yet, but I did get a digital photo of the covers, or one or two of the covers of Megaphone magazine. And I'm going to have a whole blog post in the show notes. You can go take a look. But the NCAA staff were featured in Megaphone magazine. Like, that was their social media, one person told me. That was their way of seeing who was who and who was famous and who was a big deal in the cheer world. So being an NCAA staff person was a big deal. And any person over the age, we'll call it 40, over the age of 40, that you consider cheer royalty started in that kind of culture, if not NCA staff themselves. So you can picture it. You have these cheer teams and hundreds and tens of thousands of cheerleaders across the country coming to these camps, being taught at these camps. And in 1951, Herky and his wife, Dorothy, co-founded the company called Cheerleader Supply Co. So Herky said in an interview that the kids at the camp wanted to dress alike. They wanted to all look alike. Does that sound familiar? All the team members, they all wear the same thing. Well, in 1951, they didn't have access to print presses and all of the resources that we do today. And they wanted to dress alike, but they couldn't find 20 of the same thing in the department stores. It was really hard to find that many of the same kind of outfit. So they approached Herky with that. And his wife, Dorothy, actually designed the first 16-pleat twirling cheer skirt. They expanded to knitting sweaters, manufacturing tops, jackets, chenille emblems, buttons, badges, pennants, ribbons, and more so that cheerleaders would have uniform apparel. It's also said that the schools didn't love how the cheerleaders were dressing, I guess, at games. And so they wanted something more uniform and quote unquote appropriate. Who knows what was considered inappropriate in the 1950s? If you've ever watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, apparently like women swearing in public was considered a criminal offense and they would get arrested. So, who knows what was considered inappropriate in terms of what cheerleaders were wearing back then. But Herky and his wife solved another problem. They solved the problem of cheerleaders getting more training and having community through the camps. And then they created Cheerleader Supply Co., creating these cheer uniforms and all of the other accessories that cheerleaders had in those times. So Herky's camps spread to all 50 states in the U.S., several foreign countries. He trained more than 3 million cheerleaders for over 40 years. And at one point, he said that he was making $1,000 a week, like in the 50s and 60s, just from teaching cheer camps. A couple of other fun facts about Herky. He invented the spirit stick, and I have been a walking trivia book about this, much to the annoyance of my friends and family who don't really care as much about this level of cheer that I have engrossed myself in over the last few months. But I'm walking around like, did you know? So the spirit stick. Some of you know how big of a deal the spirit stick is at a cheerleading camp because of the movie Bring It On. Others of you are high school cheerleaders, and your spirit stick, I would say the spirit stick was as big of a deal in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as the banana is for you today. But here is how the spirit stick originated. So these camps were a lot about the skill and learning tumbling skills and some stunting skills. It was very pep rally focused. And Herky said this. He said, one year at a camp, there was a team that, quote, had lots of spirit, but no talent. And so he felt bad for them and wanted to give them recognition for the amount of spirit and love they had for the sport. And so he went over and broke off a tree branch and presented it to them as the spirit stick. And then he wrapped it in ribbon, and it kept progressing, and it became the spirit stick that we know today. Or the banana. So I don't know. I like the idea of a spirit stick, but the fact that he was like, they had lots of spirit, but absolutely no talent. Herky also invented and patented the pom-pom. This was in 1971, And with the launching of color TV, Herky wanted to brighten things up with his own touch for football games and things that cheerleaders were at. So he had his own creation named the Pom Pom, and he said, I figured there had to be something more colorful on the field than a chrome stick that the cheerleaders twirled. So I got the idea to put some colored paper on a stick. Fun fact, he tried to change the name of the Pom Pom to Pom Pon, like an N at the end, because he learned that in a different language, Pom Pom meant something very offensive. So he changed the name to Pom Pon, but it didn't stick. Pom Pom kind of took off like wildfire, and we still call it the Pom Pom or the Poms today. Herky is known as the father of cheerleading. He has been referred to as the professor of Sis Boom Ba. He wrote books on cheerleading. In fact, he even wrote a book about how to put on a pep rally and how to plan a pep rally. I am not going to go as far as to say that he invented the pep rally. I think that those sorts of gatherings for schools predated him, but he certainly created more of a production and more spirit around the pep rally. And he made the cheerleaders the focus and the center of the pep rally. He wrote a book in 1958 just about, it's a book full of skits for pep rallies and offers scripts and chants that cheerleaders can offer at their school pep rallies. Ultimately, Herky was in the business and created the industry for decades and decades, and finally sold the National Cheerleaders Association and its related companies in 1986 for $20 million. And I went online and did an inflation calculator. That's equivalent to about $76 million today. I mean, like 20 million would have been enough for me. That's 76 million in today's terms. He was an icon, a legend. He created so much community in cheerleading. I have spoken with many people who had the chance to have a conversation with him or had interaction with him, and everyone has had very positive things to say about Herky and the legacy that he created. It's even said that he had a pool in the shape of a megaphone at his house. And I spent more time than I am willing to admit trying to confirm whether or not that was true. I may or may not have DM'd some of his family members. I can neither confirm nor deny, but it said that he had a megaphone shaped pool, and I think that's awesome. And I would really love to see it one day. So anybody in Dallas who knows Herky's family, I'm not going to call their names out because they're actually pretty quiet and private. I would really love to see this house, see this pool. Herky created such a legacy, not just for his family in terms of generational wealth that he created, but he created like a whole community of people. You could even argue a whole industry. Now there are millions of cheerleaders in the US. Cheer has given young people a sense of belonging. It is a cultural staple in the US. Most of us who went to any kind of conventional high school setting in the US will have some kind of lasting memory that involves a cheerleader, for better or worse, right? And cheer is why you're here listening to me and why I get to talk to you. Lawrence Herkimer, affectionately known as Herky, is to thank, at least in part, for all of this. Now, here's where it gets interesting and, dare I say, a little bit juicy. In the late 1960s, a University of Oklahoma student by the name of Jeff Webb joined the ranks of NCAA staff. Again, with these University of Texas rivals, first A&M, now OU. Like, I was raised to not like both of those universities. Those are their biggest... Anyway, we'll forgive him for that. Jeff Webb joined NCA staff, and by 1974, he was considered Herky's protege and was general manager of NCA. In terms of this story and in the industry of cheer, I think Jeff Webb is viewed as a sort of polarizing figure in the industry. When I asked around about Jeff, here are some of the things that people had to say about him. One person said every possible good decision and every possible bad decision in cheer can be traced back to Jeff Webb. Someone else said he was just all about the money. Others have described him as kind of cutthroat, like a shark. But others have said that they really respect him and that he is a great guy and kind of gets a bad rap around the industry. That Jeff is sort of blamed for everything. I have watched interviews, I have read a ton of articles, and the reasons why Jeff parted ways with Herky vary depending on what account you're reading and who you're asking. And this is where I think the real tea starts in the cheer industry, because people, they still to this day like to talk about what happened. And anytime I bring it up, I'm like, do you think that cheer was maybe founded on drama and disloyalty? And everybody has an opinion or something to say about it. I think that there are probably only a handful of people who know what actually happened and why Jeff and Herky parted ways. But here are some of the accounts on record. One says that Jeff tried to buy part of the business and Herky wouldn't let him, so Jeff quit and started his own. Another says that Herky simply wasn't happy with Jeff, and so Jeff quit. That same person also claims to be close with the Herkimer family and says that the conversation between Jeff and Herky was a day. Even presently, they remember where they were and what that day was like when Jeff and Herky parted ways. Others say that Jeff wanted to take cheer off the sidelines and make it more competitive and especially more athletic. And again, others say that Jeff was just about making money and less about the rah-rah spirit of it all. So he left to go make money. And this was the narrative that I believed for over a decade, thinking that Herky was the heart and Jeff just wanted to make money. Well, we know now that that's not true, because Herky started this whole full service cheer industry, invented those 1950s cheer uniforms and made millions of dollars from the industry. So he wasn't just about community, although I think that was at the forefront of his mind, and he built some amazing community, but he was a businessman too. Here's what Jeff is quoted as saying in the June 1994 issue of Nation's Business. The article says, although Webb enjoyed cheerleading, he believed that the activity had become stagnant, and more specifically, that NCA was missing opportunities to advance the sport. He wanted to breathe new life into cheerleading and take it in a new, more dynamic direction that incorporated athleticism and entertainment. Jeff is quoted as saying, I wanted to modernize. Just a few years ago, Jeff also did a podcast interview with David Meltzer on his YouTube channel. And I have permission from David to share this short clip with you of Jeff sharing the reasons why he started his own business in his own words.
So we started just doing training camps, really teaching people how to do these new skills, all the kind of things that you see, your daughter's involved in. And we're the only ones that we developed those techniques to teach them. So we got those going, and then we didn't have enough money to expand nationally. We came up with the competition concept, because we said, we know we've got a great thing here. People are calling us, but we can't expand nationally. So we came up with the idea to create a competition for it to be a platform so that people get it televised, so that people could see what we're doing. And then kind of the third part of that was we had to create equipment and apparel that matched the new style. It was athletic, and the people who were doing uniforms and things, there was, the old wool sweaters and the shoes with a heel on, none of that worked. So we got into kind of the major components of the business, really because we were driving this kind of belief in this new type of cheerleading.
So here's the bottom line. No matter what the reasons were, no matter what happened behind closed doors, agreements, disagreements, a difference of opinion on how the industry should be run or the direction that cheerleading should go, at just 24 years old in 1974, Jeff Webb, along with a team of NCA employees that followed him, he started UCA, the Universal Cheerleaders Association, in his apartment. A little line that Varsity's website says about this historical event in cheer was that UCA taught higher level skills. There's another article where, and I've only been able to find it cited in lawsuits. I haven't actually been able to find the specific Sports Illustrated article, but it says that Herky said, yeah, well, we hire teachers, and referring to Jeff, they hired a bunch of hot dogs. They're just a bunch of show-offs and hot dogs. And I asked somebody about this, and he said, yeah, that was something that Herky always said. Oh, they're just a bunch of hot dogs. I don't really know what that means, but I thought it was cute. So just 5 short years after Jeff started UCA and doing his own camps, he started a division of UCA named Varsity Spirit Fashion and Supplies. He began offering updated outfits that were, quote, less constrictive and that featured sleeveless tops, jumpers, and a variety of necklines. These new uniforms contrasted with the traditional sweaters and those 16 pleated skirts that cheerleaders had worn for the last several decades. So apparently this clothing line was an instant hit, and Jeff was able to market it through, you guessed it, his camps. It's reported that in its first year, this division of Varsity Spirit generated over $200,000 in sales. So over the next couple of decades, NCA, Herky's company, and UCA, Jeff Webb's company, they went head to head on camps and uniforms. And then UCA, which later became Varsity, branched out into competitions. Herky apparently sold, bought, and then resold NCA. And the ironic thing is that after all of this, in 2004, Varsity and Jeff Webb acquired NCA. Now, mind you, Herky was no longer involved in the business at that point, but that had to have been a full circle moment for Jeff to buy the business that reportedly he'd wanted to have stake in the first place, and the business that his mentor founded. Herky retired. He became very involved in his community and in SMU. However, he still remained involved in NCA for a number of years, still did interviews. The man appeared on classic TV game shows, all in the name of cheerleading. He passed away back in 2015, but again, left such a legacy behind, and people involved and leaders in this industry to this day still speak of and remember him very fondly. So now you know a little bit about the two leaders at the forefront of the cheerleading business and industry as we know it today, Lawrence Herkimer and his protege, Jeff Webb, who is the founder of Varsity and took the industry and the sport to a whole new level. In the next episode, I'm going to go through what happened from there. Varsity still wasn't a huge business, and there were still others that popped up in the cheer industry. We're going to talk more about where Jeff took it from there. At this point, there is UCA, and they started to dabble in competitions. Varsity Spirit fashion has taken off, but it still was not the only player in the industry at this point. And all-star competitive cheerleading didn't even exist yet. We're still only just talking about college and high school cheer. That was the big thing with Varsity, is that he and Herky in their respective businesses took it from college to high school kids. So how did we get to where we are with all of the all-star gyms and competitions? How did Varsity become a multi-billion-dollar company? I'm going to talk more about those aspects, the business aspect and the all-star part of the history of cheer in the next episode. Guys, I promise you, this is a fascinating and wild ride. If you haven't loved the tea already, I know you're going to love the next episode. Make sure you share it with a friend. If you loved the episode, please leave a review on the podcast in Apple Podcasts or in Spotify. And until the next episode, remember, it's just cheerleading, but man, it's like a multi-billion-dollar business too.